So it's been your first full day of meditation practice. And as you get into retreat mode, you're going to start to see for yourself that this meditation might not be as easy as you thought it might be. And the reason for that is because there's all kinds of things coming and going in the mind. And these things that come and go in the mind, that deflect the mind from its object, are what are known as hindrances, distractions. A hindrance can be sensual craving, ill will, restlessness, sloth and torpor, and doubt. And they can arise in many different ways, and they're not limited to just these hindrances. In the suttas, in the Pali Canon, there are a myriad of different kinds of hindrances that arise. There can be fear, there can be anger, there can be lust, there can be jealousy, there can be covetousness, there can be pride, conceit, arrogance, all kinds of things that come and go in the mind. But for the purpose of meditation and to simplify and make it easy, we're looking at these 5 basic hindrances. So the process of right effort, the process of using the 6 R's are the general antidote, the general mechanism through which you are able to recognize and let go of these hindrances and replace them with something uplifting, like the smile. And ultimately, you are starting to bring your attention back to its object, and you are sharpening your attention when you do this. In Majjhima Nikaya 43, 44, one of those, there it says that the equipment for right collectedness, Sama Samadhi, right meditation, there are 2 things that are needed: right effort and right mindfulness. Right effort, there are 4 components to right effort. And this right effort is not necessary just for meditation. It's applicable in every aspect of our lives. What are the 4 right efforts? The first right effort is to recognize and prevent the arising of unwholesome states. Right? So any unarisen unwholesome state. What is an unarisen unwholesome state? Any of the hindrances that have come up or are about to come up. To recognize that. The second right effort is to abandon already arisen unwholesome states of mind. So, I recognize in my mind there is craving. I recognize in my mind there is something that is disturbing me and taking me away from my object of meditation. It might be restlessness, it might be sloth and torpor, it might be whatever it is. So what do I do with that? I abandon it. I release my attention from it, and I relax the tightness and tension present in the mind and body. Then the third right effort is to generate a wholesome state of mind. What is a wholesome state of mind? A wholesome state of mind can be any of the 7 enlightenment factors. We'll get into all of that. I don't want to drop everything on you immediately. Or it could be your object of meditation, which is, in this case, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, or just the mind that is quiet. So you generate that by doing what? First, you uplift the mind through the smile, V-smile. Second, you return back to the object and you keep your attention there. And that's the fourth right effort, maintaining the wholesome state of mind. So when we are doing this process of the 6 R's, it is already helping you fulfill those right efforts. When you have right effort, you have right mindfulness. Yesterday I told you I don't like the word mindfulness. So we're talking about right what? Right remembrance, right observation, right understanding. Right remembrance, meaning remembering how remembering to observe how mind's attention moves from one thing to the other. So we're remembering to see where is our attention in every given moment. And this is only done through right effort. In fact, they are seamlessly fitted together. When you have the process of recognition, your mindfulness is already present. And as a result of which, your mind becomes collected and the attention becomes undispersed. It means unscattered. Your attention starts to come together and becomes collected around its object of meditation, rests on its object of meditation. So why do these hindrances arise in the first place? What is the reason for their arising? From where do they arise? In the suttas, it's mentioned that when one does not follow the precepts, when one has unwholesome intentions, unwholesome speech, unwholesome actions, the mind becomes disturbed. And the mind generates these hindrances. It's like an action-reaction situation. Maybe not immediately, but as we become ingrained in sensual craving, in ill will, in sloth and torpor, in doubt, and in restlessness, through one of the breaking of these precepts, then it becomes second nature to the mind. It's a process of conditioning that we've gone through. We may not see it immediately, we may not even accept that, and that's okay. But as your mind gets deeper, it will see for itself that, for example, when I have an intention of ill will, or I act or speak out of ill will, my mind vibrates at that level of ill will, generates that ill will, and therefore the distraction of ill will is prone to arise. When I pursue sensual pleasures and I become engrossed in the pursuit of sensual pleasures, my mind strengthens around the idea of sensual pleasures, and therefore sensual craving is almost automatic for that mind. When I use false speech, I create doubt I create doubt in myself, I create doubt in others, I create doubt. And what happens? Doubt, which is the inability to understand and discern what is wholesome and unwholesome, is present in the mind. When I steal, when I take what is not given, what arises? This desire to possess, this desire to obtain, this desire to collect, this desire to keep having. Taking what is not given doesn't just mean possessions or objects. Taking what is not given can mean taking undue credit, taking away someone's time, taking away someone's attention, taking away anything really that is not offered, that is not given, that is not freely given. And so that agitates the mind, that gives rise to restlessness in the mind. When I indulge in intoxicants, what are intoxicants? Sura Madhu is what is known as in Pali. And this is generally, at the time of the Buddha, was referring to alcohol. Anything that alters the mind, that dulls the mind, dulls the senses. And the overindulgence of that, the indulgence in that process, dulls the mind. But it doesn't have to be limited to just alcohol or any kind of intoxicant or mind-altering substance. It could be the overindulgence of consuming something through the senses. It's not just food. There are food for the senses. The shows we watch, the music we listen to, the books that we read, all of these are different content that our mind starts to consume. We live now in a world that is interconnected through the process of mobile phones. This is the beauty of this retreat. Nobody has your phone here because you're going through a dopamine detox. That's very helpful for the retreat, for your meditation. Dopamine is the craving molecule. It's the molecule that says, I want more. And what's interesting about dopamine is, dopamine arises not in the obtaining of the object of one's desire. Dopamine arises in the pursuit of wanting to obtain the object of one's desire. In the desire itself, in the craving itself. So, we live in a world where we have social media, and overconsumption of social media has done what? It's made us all stupid, dull. It's made us stop thinking critically. It's starting to deteriorate our discernment of what is wholesome and unwholesome. And it creates sloth and torpor. I mean, not just the overconsumption of media. I mean, you think about people who are scrolling on Instagram, doom scrolling, as we say nowadays. What's going on there? There's so many context switches that are going on. The mind goes here and here and here and here and here. And then it feels at the end of that tiresome. And of course, that's compounded by scrolling through Instagram late at night. So you don't have enough sleep. And so now you're compounding that sloth and torpor. So these different breaking of precepts in this way can lead to these different hindrances. And so yesterday I talked to you about, the importance of taking the precepts and keeping them. It's generally for the aid of meditation, for your meditation to be benefited. Speaking of sleep, I want you guys to make sure that you get enough sleep on retreat. This is one of the questions I will be asking you in the interviews. Are you sleeping enough? Are you getting enough sleep? And are you eating enough? Because there's no magic in depriving yourself of sleep for the purpose of meditation. There's no magic in fasting for the purpose of meditation. Fasting is great for the body, to give the body a break, the digestion system a break, and so on. That's great. But don't do it for this retreat. As it is, you only eat 2 times a day. Just make sure you get enough sufficient food. And I encourage naps on this retreat. I generally would advise you to nap before 3 o'clock, somewhere around, let's say 12:30, between 12:30 and 2:30. I'm not saying to nap from 12:30 to 2:30. I'm saying any time between that, 20-minute nap, 25-minute nap at the most. I remember one guy, I told him, make sure you take naps. He was a college student. It was a couple of years ago. And I asked him, so have you been napping? He said, yeah, it's been great. These naps have been really great. I said, how long have you been napping? Oh, 3 hours. So that's not what I mean here. And, that's the thing. That's the other thing about the meditation. Don't push yourself. If you feel like you're losing steam in your sitting and it's just not going anywhere, go for a walk. Go for a walk and do the walking meditation. And when you feel like you want to come and sit down, sit. Some people's sits are great in the evenings. Some people's sits are great in the mornings. Some people's sits are great in the middle of the day. See what works for you and try to sit for as long as you can. But don't push it. So today I want to really emphasize the importance of wholesome actions. There are these 10 wholesome actions. They are categorized in 3. There is wholesome physical actions, wholesome verbal actions, and wholesome mental actions. What are the wholesome physical actions? Abstaining from harming and killing any living being. Abstaining from taking what is not given. Abstaining from sexual misconduct. The wholesome verbal actions are abstaining from false speech, abstaining from divisive speech, abstaining from malicious speech, and abstaining from what's usually seen as unnecessary speech. And then there are 3 wholesome mental actions. And those are contentment, non-ill will, and right view. You're going to need all of this if you want to have a proper sit. So when we keep the precepts, they are helping us to bring the mind or prime the mind for meditation. So what do we mean by abstaining from harming or killing living beings? It means that we don't have that intention, first and foremost. And secondly, it means that we don't actually do it. What does it mean to kill? Well, in some of the texts in Buddhism, it talks about that you need 5 components. You need a living being, you need a weapon, you need an intention to kill, the action of killing should happen, and the living being should then be dead. None of us are going to be doing this on this retreat, hopefully. That means not stepping on an ant. If you do it by mistake, that's different. Remember, there has to be an intention, right? So how do you cultivate the opposite of that? Loving kindness. Be loving and kind to yourself. Be loving and kind to the beings around you. Send out loving and kind thoughts to the beings around you. Abstaining from taking what is not given. Basically, that means don't be coveting things around you. You don't need to have this thing that somebody else has. Right? You don't need to think about the things that you don't have that somebody else has. You don't need to feel like you have some kind of lack. That's where it comes from, a sense of lack. Everything here on this retreat is freely given, right? The food and resources, the books behind you, all of these things are freely given. So make use of it. So it's very difficult for you to break that precept here. Sensual misconduct and sexual misconduct, they're one and the same in terms of the translation, but obviously they're different in terms of what they mean. Sensual misconduct is, I really identify with my eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind, but generally these 5 physical senses. And because I identify with them, I want more of the things that I consume through these senses. And in the pursuit of wanting more of these sensual experiences, I cheat, I steal, I lie, I kill, I harm, so on and so forth. I break other precepts in the pursuit of sensual pleasures. There's a difference between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure is when I identify with the physical senses and I want more of it. Happiness is different. When I was in South India, I was with my first spiritual teacher. I'd met him after some time. He was the one who took me to the Himalayas back when I was 16, after I left school. I was actually expelled from school, but he was my theater teacher at the time. But he was also a yogi, and he would discuss yoga with me. And so the day I got expelled, he told me, I want you to come with me to the Himalayas, and we'll spend some time there. And I said, sure, let's do that. I was already in a pretty rough place. And so I went with him, and we traveled to different parts. We went to a place called Haridwar, Rishikesh, Uttarkashi, and then other places around there. And he introduced me to many different kinds of philosophies. Anyway, this was the same spiritual teacher that I met after some time in South India. And I went to visit him. And being in the theater world and in the film world, he was invited to go and meet with some kind of celebrity in South India. So we were invited to go to this person's house. We went there, and we had a nice meal, and they gave us a tour of the house. Really lovely place and everything. They had all these Buddha statues and gardens and things like that where you could meditate. So these people were very interested in meditation and spirituality. And knowing that I taught meditation, they asked me this question. They asked me, if you were to tell us in just one line, what do you teach? What is your philosophy? How do you teach what it is that you do? And I said, I teach the difference between dependent happiness and independent happiness. And they said, what do you mean by that? I said, there's dependent happiness, which is dependent upon externalities of the world. So my happiness is dependent upon the relationship I have. My happiness is dependent upon the food that I eat. My happiness is dependent upon the validation that I get from people. Or independent happiness. And that's the happiness that we're going after on retreat. In reality, it's not actually happiness. I'll explain why not. But we call it happiness because we say that we are the happy ones, right? That happiness that is independent of sensual pursuit is nibbana, is the cessation of suffering. And so he really understood that. He said, that he laughed and he said, that makes sense. Dependent happiness and independent happiness. And before I left, he said, I'm going after independent happiness. So this is the understanding of sensual misconduct, is that we mistake the dependent happiness for independent happiness. We forget the difference between the two. And we want immediate pleasure. We want instant gratification. But if you let go of all of that, then you already experience nibbana. Because what the Buddha was teaching, we think the Eightfold Path is a path towards enlightenment and towards awakening. But no, it's not. The Eightfold Path is a path towards the cessation of suffering. You want to call that awakening, you can say that's awakening. But we're talking about the cessation of suffering. The Buddha himself said, I teach only two things, suffering and the cessation of suffering. That is the Four Noble Truths. So we're not going after sensual pleasures here. We're going after something that is outside of that. It is known as the supramundane, the lokuttara, as it's known in Pali, beyond the world, the ultimate, the ultimate refuge, which is nibbana. Abstaining from sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct means that we don't cheat on our partners. It has no moral implication on what kind of partnership that is, how many partners you have, all those things. As long as there is an integrity to that relationship, you do not cheat. That's basically what it means. So these are the four physical deeds, the wholesome physical deeds. The verbal deeds, abstaining from lying, abstaining from false speech. What does it mean to lie? What does it mean to use false speech? Knowing one says one does not know. Not knowing one says one knows. In other words, somebody hides a fact, hides a truth. Or somebody bears false witness on someone else. Knowing it not to be true, they say something about that person or about the situation. It's always safe for your mind to be like, this is what I have heard, and this is what I have understood based on the facts that have been presented to me. Instead of unwittingly lying. Of course, that would be a mistake, but intentionally lying means deceit for the purpose of obtaining something, or just for the purpose of deceiving the other person. When you do that, you are not giving that person an informed decision, or allowing that person to make an informed decision, or an informed set of choices. So you abstain from lying. Liars, people who are pathological liars, also turn out to be alcoholics for some reason. It's like they're numbing the guilt, numbing the pain. But pathological liars also, and again, this is not scientific, this is just an observation by some former teachers and spiritual practitioners in different traditions. But when one starts to lie and intentionally deceive, one thinks about others. Are they deceiving me? Are they telling the whole truth? And one starts to doubt. And this is how doubt creeps in. Abstaining from divisive speech. What do we mean by divisive speech? Gossip. Saying something about another person. How do you know it's gossip? If you are talking about that person when they're not in the room, and suppose that they were in the room and you were talking about them, how would you feel? If you felt uncomfortable saying what you're going to be saying, then generally it's gossip. I have seen firsthand how this affects the mind through people who have spoken about my friends to me behind their backs. I had one person who told me, so-and-so said this about you. And I said to them, well, then let me speak with so-and-so and figure out what happened there. And they said, no, don't do that. So I said, that's unfair. You tell me that so-and-so said this about me, but you don't give me the opportunity to go and see if that's true or not. That's divisive speech. Hearing one thing about one person, he says something about that person to another. Hearing about this person, about someone or something, he goes to another party and he says something about that person. This is divisive speech. And when you do that, it creates so much agitation in the mind. It creates so much disturbance in the mind. Now you have to figure out, who did I say what to about who? And you start again, you start having doubts. And this divisive speech creates a darkened heart in others, because you say something about one person behind their back to this person, and then you say this person said this about you to another person, and everybody has these doubts about everybody else. Very bad. Very bad. It can create a schism, and that is a terrible piece of karma to have. I'm telling you all of this because it's important to understand where the mind has maybe slipped and where the mind can do better. Because it's not about judging ourselves. It's not about, oh, I was a bad person, in my past, or this or that. It's about, where can I rectify the things that went wrong, where I did wrong, and where are the things that I could have done better that I can now choose to do better. And as my intention goes in that direction, my mind starts to experience peace. My mind starts to experience non-regret. And non-regret is the basis for gladness, for relief. And that relief brings joy. And that joy brings tranquility. And that tranquility brings comfort. And that comfort brings samadhi, an even mind. And finally, in terms of the verbal actions, abstaining from unnecessary speech. Just trying to fill in the void of the silence can be unnecessary speech. It's not that big of a deal, because some people like to talk about the weather, try to connect with each other and all that. That's different. But I'm talking about, talking about politics. The Buddha talked about this. He said one should abstain from talk of kings. Because everybody has their view about this king and that king, this leader and that leader, this particular party and that particular party and so on. It's got no use in Dhamma, especially on retreat here. No use. And this unnecessary blabbering that the Buddha talks about, it's like the inability to control one's tongue, thereby the inability to control one's mind. You think about little children. They have all of these facts in their mind, especially when they're about 5 or 6 year olds. And all of the facts are things that you already know. But you got to listen. Right? Because you have to be a good parent or a good aunt or uncle, or you have to be a good whatever it is. And just listen. But kids, they don't know, that you know these things. And they keep blabbering. And kids are generally very restless. So this causes restlessness as well. This is restless speech. So noble silence, as we are hopefully doing on this retreat, is probably the best deterrent against any of these kinds of speeches. And noble silence leads to noble silence of the mind, because the mind becomes more balanced. So finally, there's the 3 wholesome mental actions. And what are those? Those are contentment. Yesterday I talked about nekama, which means renunciation, but another word for renunciation is contentment. Content in whatever is arising right now, right here. Now, this is really important to understand in the context of meditation. Letting go of our expectations of how the meditation should be. Letting go of any kind of wonderful experience that arises as well in the meditation. Everything that arises also ceases. All experience in the meditation is just this wonderful new episode of a particular season of a television show called your mind. So watch it. Watch it with interest. Observe what's going on. But don't get caught up. Don't identify with the character. It's very difficult to when we watch a really nice, compelling show. We get identified with the protagonist, or we get identified with this particular character. How could he say that to her? Or how could this happen? Could you see last night's episode? All of these things. It's the same thing that can happen in meditation. So I would suggest to you guys, if you're able to, is to just, when you finished your sit, just to observe and review what happened in the meditation. That way you don't get caught up in the good, bad, or indifferent aspects of the meditation. Your mind, your mind is already going to do a 1 or 2 minute review of what happened. And trust in the mind's ability to revise what happened in that particular sit. So once you're done, all right, great. Before I get up, what happened? What were the highlights of this particular sit? And this is going to be helpful for you when you do the interviews starting tomorrow. So you'll be able to tell me what happened in your sit. Now don't worry if you don't remember everything. Just the things that you pick up that are highlights. So the contentment is just being present with what is arising and what is passing away in the mind. If a jhana is arising, it's arising. If a hindrance is arising, it's arising. If a hindrance is passing away, it's passing away. Some new experience happens, it happens. But your mind remains content in whatever is coming up. It's not grabbing or grasping after another experience or that same experience to repeat that same sit. No 2 sits are going to be the same. Even if you were able to go into jhana whenever you wanted and intentionalize going into a specific jhana, It's not going to be the same as when you intentionalize going into that same jhana in a previous sit. The second wholesome mental action is non-ill will. We already know about this. We've talked about this before. And this process of non-ill will is cultivated through loving kindness, which we are all striving for perfection in. And when I say striving, I don't mean pushing. I mean we're all aiming for that. We're all trying for the cultivation of greater degrees of this friendliness, which allows us to be free of any kind of ill will towards ourselves or towards others. And then finally, we have right view. I'll talk briefly about right view because that's something I want to explore later in a talk fully. When we talk about right view, there's two kinds of right view. There's the mundane right view and the supramundane right view. The mundane right view is all about action and consequence. It's all about when I do a certain kind of action with intention, it has some kind of a consequence at some point in time. That's the mundane. The supramundane is the understanding of the Four Noble Truths. That's the development of wisdom and the cultivation of vidya, or vijja in Pali, which is not necessarily knowledge, but it's more actually the realization of what is, the realization of this reality, which is all, which in all reality, the Four Noble Truths are present. That is suffering, the causes and conditions for suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. So these are the things to try to cultivate, not just on retreat, but even off of retreat. And the more we do this, the easier it is for our mind to just slip right into bhavana, mental development, slip right into samadhi, a mind that is even and balanced and collected. So when we do this, it's easier for us to catch the hindrances. And when the hindrances arise, it's easier for us to recognize, oh, here it is. And we release, we relax, we re-smile, uplift the mind, come back to our object, and repeat whenever necessary. You already have the tools, right? You are your teacher. Your mind will teach you how to do all of this, one way or the other. We are here just to kind of say, hey, try it this way, try it that way. Have you thought about this? But this mind that you have of yours when you are meditating is your laboratory, is your playground. Do with it what you will, using the tools that have been provided to you, namely the 6 R's. You don't need to remember everything in this Dhamma talk. If there's one thing to remember from this talk, it's that if I have kindness in my heart and balance in my mind, everything else that needs to arise in terms of jhanas and whatever else will arise. Because that is the beginning process. When I keep and maintain the precepts, my mind already veers towards samadhi with its intermediate steps. And veering into samadhi, my mind is prone towards panya, towards wisdom. This is what I mean by the mind is your own teacher. It will show you how it works. Your mission, should you choose it, is to just be a silent observer. Just be in the background, observing everything, making little tiny adjustments when you need to. Generally, just the 6 hours when you need to. And everything will unravel before you. I think that's it, yeah? Okay, let's share some merit. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.